Hello, I'm John and welcome to my channel Disquiet and Dragons. In this video we'll be talking about some books and their film adaptations and asking the question, which did it better? Werewolf edition. The first book we're going to talk about is Thor by Wayne Smith. Thor is a story about a family, mother, father and their two children and their German shepherd Thor. They live in a large house, the father's a lawyer and everything seems quite ideal until the mother's brother, Ted, they find out that he's had a really bad experience and he comes to stay with the family, but he's got his own caravan that's like kept in the grounds of their house. Everybody thinks that things are going quite well, everyone apart from Thor, because Thor knows that there's something very wrong with Uncle Ted. The book has a really unique viewpoint, as the majority of the book is told from the viewpoint of Thor himself. So you have this unique perspective where Thor is protecting his pack from a perceived threat, but Thor has conflicted views because he knows he needs to protect his pack, but he knows that some of the things that he needs to do to protect his pack go against the laws that the head of the pack, the dad of the family, puts in place. So some of the conflict that we see from Thor's perspective is, does he protect his pack at the risk of being a bad dog, or does he toe the line and be a good dog and let harm come upon his family? Thor, I really enjoyed this book. It's just so unique. There are other books around that tell a story from a dog's perspective, but other than Fluke by James Herbert, I think this is one of the better ones. The film, however, it's got a slightly different viewpoint. It tells it more from the mother and the son's perspective, because it's a smaller family unit in the film. There's no father, there's no sister, so it's just mother, son, Thor and Uncle Ted. The film, it was made in the mid-90s and the actual werewolf effects themselves are really well done. Practical effects, but some of the transformation scenes, ooh, they had that, can you remember that really weird looking morphing special effect that a lot of 90s films had? It uses that. It just looks terrible. If they'd have maybe spent just a bit more money and done everything practically, it would have been a much better film. Overall, thoroughly enjoyable, if a little cheesy, the film, but well worth a watch. But overall, I think the book did it better. The next book we're going to talk about is The Bloody Chamber by Angela Carter, which was written in 1979, but in particular the short story contained within it, The Company of Wolves. The Company of Wolves is based on a dark fairy tale based on Red Riding Hood. It's a beautifully written story describing the woodland and the main character's journey to go and see her grandmother, and there's little stories interwoven between the overriding narrative in between it. Just little throwaway lines about a wedding where everyone turned into a wolf, and there's another little story about a travelling man who married someone in the village and disappeared and then came back with his company of wolves. The book, it's really quite short. You could probably read it in about half an hour to an hour, depending on how fast you read. But for such a short story, it really does pack in quite a lot. There's some really, really good descriptions of the werewolves and the wolves. The worst wolves are the ones that are hairy on the inside, says the grandmother as she's saying to the main character how to beware of humans and wolves. The film, actually called The Company of Wolves, was made in the early 80s, and the screenplay was also co-written by Angela Carter, and I think it really helps the film maintain the ethereal and dreamlike qualities of the short story. The way the film is shot, it's absolutely beautiful. The lighting and the set building, it just looks like something out of a dream. And because of the way it's shot, it can be quite surreal at times. So it's not really a straightforward film to follow. It's got an overriding story where the main character is dreaming, and each of her separate dreams is one of the little short stories that Angela Carter mentions in the book. The visuals themselves of the woods are so whimsical, and it's really at odds with the quite savage transformations of humans into wolves. Considering it was made so long ago, really holds up well. The practical effects are fantastic, and with this one, book or the film, I've got to go with the film. The next book we're going to talk about is Cycle of the Werewolf by Stephen King and its film adaptation Silver Bullet. The story takes place in the small town of Tarker's Mill. As always with Stephen King, it's like a really small town with lots of different characters. But in this town, Tarker's Mill, strange murders, really violent, horrific murders start taking place. And it also takes the town a little while to realise that the murders are taking place around the time of the full moon. In the book, each month shows a different werewolf attack. There's a couple of recurring characters, and if there was a main character, it would be the young boy, Marty Kozlor. The book does show how he deals with the fact that a werewolf is stalking his town. It's a unique book. It's a very short story, but it's maybe 60 pages. But the book itself is so unique and beautiful because it has these wonderful illustrations which follow the story throughout the course of a year. Some of the illustrations show the werewolf itself. Some show the attacks that the werewolf commits on the members of the town. And it's a really fun book to read and look through. The film is a bit different, but has the same sort of story. Rather than take place over the course of a year, it takes place over the course of a summer. And this time, Marty very much is the main character. He's a young boy, about 11 years old, and unfortunately, he's paralysed. And his uncle, Red, wonderfully played by Gary Busey, seems obsessed with making him these rocket-powered motorbike wheelchairs. The story follows Marty over the course of the summer, and as in the book, people start being attacked, and it takes the town a while to realise that something's really not right. When Marty himself, he goes out for his own little fireworks display on his wheelchair, and he gets attacked by the werewolf. In defence, he fires a firework at it. And the rest of the film kind of shows how Marty deals with trying to persuade the adults around him that there's a werewolf murdering in the town of Tarker's Mill. When it comes to which is better, the film or the book, the film, it's just cheesy 80s horror goodness. The practical effects for the werewolf are pretty good, not quite as good as some other 80s werewolf films, but Gary Busey, he just steals the show. He's like this unhinged uncle. Some of the shots and the lighting and practical effects, it's what you expect from an 80s horror film, and it's well worth watching. The book, while short, it's so unique with all its illustrations, and it's Stephen King. It's not that often you go wrong with Stephen King. So I'm calling this one a draw. And the final book we're going to talk about today is The Howling by Gary Brandner. Karen and Roy Beatty, they lead a really comfortable, happy life, and Karen is happily pregnant. Unfortunately, Roy gets called away for work, And in the housing complex, Karen is viciously attacked and she suffers a miscarriage. Roy decides that to help her get over the attack and so they can both heal, more so Karen healing because she was the one who was attacked, they are going to move to a remote small town. In this town, they get there and everyone seems a bit off. Nobody is really that welcoming. And when they're going around the town, and within the first few days of arriving at their new house, Karen is lying awake at night and she hears a strange howling in the woods. The town is full of some strange characters. They go shopping one day and they go into this little gift shop and they meet Marcia, who's like this very spiritual woman, and she seems to be a bit flirty with Roy. There's a sheriff who just isn't really a sheriff and doesn't really want to do too much. And there's various characters in the book. The book itself, it describes the woodland and really well, and describes Karen's increasing sense of isolation really well. The prose itself is really fast paced and it really does give you a good sense of isolation and creepiness of being alone in the woods. The film is really, really different. Rather than be attacked in the way that she was in the book, Karen is now a TV newswoman and she's being stalked by a serial killer. The police decide that they want to try and perform a sting operation, so they wire up Karen and she goes off to meet the serial killer, and as you can probably guess, it all goes wrong and she gets attacked, and quite rightly so, is really traumatized. Instead of going off into a new house in the woods this time, they go to the colony, which is this kind of wellness retreat. The doctors there and all the people there seem really accepting of Karen and her husband, and some of the characters are in the film as well, like Marcia's in it again, but instead of this spiritual, really nature-loving woman, she's portrayed as a nymphomaniac, and it's a bit crude. I think they could have done much more with the character of Marcia. As to whether I prefer the book or the film, this is the one where, as much as I love the film, the book is far superior. It just does a much better job of showing Karen's sense of isolation and the creeping dread of how she knows that something isn't right, but she can't quite put her finger on it. So I'm going with the book on this one. So those are my opinions on which did it better, Werewolf edition, whether it was the book or the film that I preferred. And I'd just like to say that even if I did say I preferred one or the other, none of these are bad books or bad films. I'd say the worst film is still a 7 out of 10. I love every single one of these stories and every single one of these films. And if you like werewolves, you'll probably get a lot of enjoyment from reading or watching any of them. And that brings us to the end of the video. I'd just like to say thank you to everyone who subscribed or watched my videos since I've started my channel. It really is much appreciated. I've also had some shout outs by other channels recently, and I'd really like to thank them for giving my little channel a shout out. I'll put their channels in the description notes, and well worth checking them all out because they all have really great channels. As always, I hope you're enjoying what you're reading. I'll talk to you again soon. Cheers, bye.